Hello and welcome. Today is the 18th day of October 2017, and I know I did a 30-minute crypto video earlier, so let's do another one again. The last time I did a video, Bitcoin was down to 51.90, down about 408 for the day. It had slipped below the 18 average of highs, not quite making it to the lows, and it looked like it was going to make it. Maybe it still will. Now it's down 171 or 3%. It has managed to get above this 18 average price action, this red line, right where the bottom on this day occurred to be. So that tells me right now that it's at a previous area. A now what situation? What does now what mean? It's a situation that I state as a defining moment. Because, yeah, in a bear market, usually what's going to happen is it's going to come back to where it came from, a key moment, a key place like that, and then start to roll over. But if the situation of such does not present itself and the sellers do not take any control over, then all selling will be small, thus making higher lows, and then eventually in time, it will manage to get past that area and thus work towards making that level support in a bullish cause. And now let's switch it over to the 15-minute, and then the introduction. Everything you do is within your own risk and own reward. And what I've done has been within my own risk and reward, and it's worked out very, very well. But within this time frame, I see several times hit around this level, which was the resistance from earlier today, in which it had its last leg lower from. Now it's resisting, so this is the rectangular range. Price action, little bit in there, but it's not that low I referred to before. I'll take a look at that with like a 1 hour or 4 hour time frame. But the obvious point is breaking out above here, these types of large moves and decent gains can definitely come into perspective. And then within the now moment situation, weakness and price action holding, staying in towards this area will definitely give reason. Okay, that looks like this is that failed rally, at least within this move. And then the levels hitting, probably piercing below 5,000 would most likely come into play. We can see price action did reach about 51 even so far. And a lot of it is about volatility extreme. Let's switch it up to that 2 hour time frame. So on the first rise, the first significant sell-off came down to where price action currently stands. Had an okay rally, not as sharp of a sell-off, decent rally, and then a sharper sell-off from compared to this one, which matched the previous level. Now a 2x hit bottom. Of course, that's where we stand now. Test number 3 obviously did not find support. And what happens when you don't find support at a key level? I've talked about this quite often. The answer is fast move to a decent leg lower, at least one leg lower, and that's what happened. We could also see that on the move in here, that this candle represented resisting it on the short-term original decline move lower. So that's why I put this deeming into a now what situation. Because if this thing, especially if it does it quick, if you're talking about price actually getting into here, I've talked about this pattern oftentimes. Failed breakdown, fast move. That's, of course, if it manages to hold and stay into the 5,600 area minimum. The holding in this area, even if it builds a range, 5,300-ish, that would at least nullify the fact that it's a very bearish looking mode. It would go more towards a neutral with a very huge up bias from this move and a small down bias from this move. And you got two different biases. It stands at the level of weakness that it's been having earlier today is no longer in place. If, of course, it can correctly go sideways, which is basically what it was doing in here. But I've even seen situations where maybe price action would just go in along here, and I could state for a while, okay, it'll be 2 or 3 days later, I'll be talking about this move from what would be a few days ago. And those are usually pre-indicators that, that there's a good chance that we could probably have a good breakout coming soon. But when I put everything into perspective amongst Bitcoin, I'm going to put a more longer term chart up for this one now. And we'll use the weekly. But people holding Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies at this stage, we're still in early adoption. When you look at the amount of people that are actually actively into cryptocurrencies, the number to be very small. And the one little thing that I loved about computer programming was the if-else statement. If a certain criteria occurs, then a computer is supposed to execute a certain action. But if it doesn't, it's going to execute a different action. So if the cryptocurrencies and Bitcoins do become successful, then where does price action stand here compared to the times when success is in place, when it is obviously much more popular, much more known by other people, and most obviously held by other people? And the answer to that is obvious, that price action in dollars would most likely be substantially higher if, of course, dollars were to still exist. And then if dollars don't exist on that scenario, how well would cryptos do? There's the other one, if-else statement on the dollar survival. But the else. Let's assume that cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin especially, doesn't do well. Then it's ultimately going to pretty much be worth nothing. So therefore, if you knew right now that that was the case, then that would seem like the obvious time to sell. But if you knew that exact same information here, how was selling at 1500 doing for you? If you knew that information here, how was getting out at 350 doing for you? So within the else, if in the situation Bitcoin does fail, then the question to me within the top becomes, where would it be placed at? Could this thing go to 10,000, 20,000, 50,000, 6 figures, 7 figures before that occurs? Now, if it goes to 7 figures, that would be the most ultimate speculative bubble I would have ever seen in my life. But I do think there's a darn near good chance, if this thing does flat on its face kind of deal, that it's not going to start its move lower until, of course, much later on. Of course, that gets you into a risk and reward when you take that. And I'm taking the risk that this market is not going to top anytime soon, and then roll over and then see a level we'll never see again. And then some sort of bear market will come, we'll retest this level, test this level, and maybe later on even test some of these other lower levels. Because if you think of the grand scheme of things, when we move into a significant allotment of time, a large sample size of days, a couple years, 3 years even, what's the likelihood that Bitcoin moves far, far, far from 5420 in either or both directions, where it's going to go on the upside well past 15, 20,000. And of course, I'm not throwing out 6 and 7 figures on top of that. And then on the downside, at least a test of these previous lows, which would, what right now would be 200, you're going down 54.20, that would work out mathematically to almost everything, pretty much. And that's why I say it could, if there's a possibility, if it falls flat in its face, it could start falling flat in its face in 2018 maybe, and then make its ride lower at that point. Now I'm going to use the final part of this video time to talk about Bitcoin Gold. Because, I mean, I haven't been too optimistic about it as far as the news in which I have seen towards it. At least with Bitcoin Cash before it happened, I had heard like it was like, oh, it's like a $300 coin. And back in here when it was a $300 coin and I was looking at like $2,700 prices, I'm thinking, okay, that's over 10%. Yeah, I mean that's worth thinking about. That's a good gain. And a lot of it is going to work out to how much the Bitcoin Gold is worth. Because ultimately speaking, with Bitcoin Cash, there was, as I showed before, 30-40% amazing gains possible, but realistically getting 15-20% wasn't that difficult. And those are superb gains if you can get it. 10%, then you know what, that's good. That's good. 5%, it's worth it. It's worth it. I'll take it. 1 to 2%. I'm definitely don't think it's worth doing all of this work for several weeks to get 1 or 2% higher than what it's worth. And 1 to 2% would be like a $100 coin right now, a 2%. And there's a lot of these crypto coins worth like $10 and $8 and cheap. I mean, is it possible that this thing could come out? Oh, it's trading at like 80,000 Satoshi. Yay. I just got a match with, I got like, maybe in some cases, if you got 10 Bitcoin, I got 10 of them. Yay. And you say that sarcastically speaking. But I do realize that if there's any information coming out that the love or lack thereof towards Bitcoin Gold comes into play, that it would make me think, like, what's the whole point? Is it now time to get into altcoins? I've been wanting to do it, but is it time to get into it now? Because, I mean, I'm not going to care too much about getting anything. I mean, this is already not such a, I mean, 3-4%, I'm like, okay, whatever. And of course, anything lower than this becomes a joke. Anyway, thanks for tuning in, and I'm out. Bye-bye.